Hey guys, I'm going to show you today how to change the CPU on a 2008 24-inch iMac, and I believe the model identifier is 8.1. And yeah, basically these CPUs you can get really easily on eBay. And then the tricky part is how do you install that inside the iMac, and I'm going to show this to you how to do this, because obviously the tricky part is to remove this glass panel and then remove the display behind the glass panel, and I'm going to show this to you in a second. But first let's have a closer look here what I got. The exact model that you will need if you have the 24-inch iMac from early 2008. You're gonna need an Apple Intel E8435 Core Duo processor, and I think the maximum that Apple delivered with this particular model of the iMac was back in the day the 3.6 gigabyte version. Now I researched this online and maybe I can show this to you here. I believe there was a quad core version on the same socket. And back in the day, these quad-core CPUs, I think they retail for $1,000. Unfortunately, I don't have the quad-core version right now, but I would really love to try the quad-core version at some point too. It might be a little bit tricky and it might not work, but guys, let me know in the comments below if you want to see a test of the quad-core model, and maybe I'm going to do a test of the quad-core model. And then also, what do you want to keep in mind regardless of which particular iMac you own? I mean, you know, the iMac it's maybe that thin, so it's not very thick. So there's like from my perspective, like a little bit of thermal challenge going on. So I'm pretty sure the thermal compound, the paste that you usually place on the CPU, I guess after such a long time, it will dry out. I mean, check this out. This says 8 years durability. I'm pretty sure, because I never changed the paste on the CPU or on the graphics card, that the existing paste on the iMac is probably pretty dried out. So that's for all of you guys that even if you don't do the CPU upgrade, maybe consider like what kind of stresses are put on the hardware, like let's say on a hot summer day, when you export a video file or play a game or do whatever you do on the computer. I mean, if it's just browsing the web, the iMac can still get pretty warm. So I really advocate that after like many years of good service life, that maybe you do maintenance work, just like cleaning out the dust and replacing the thermal paste, even if you don't plan on doing a CPU upgrade. So that's be really interesting for you guys to see that, how that is done. And why don't we get started? Or like the Berkeley psychology professor always used to say, let's get rolling. What you're gonna need is like one of these, and you can probably pick these up very affordably at your local hardware store. That's like some kind of suction mechanism, which I'm going to use in a moment to gently lift off the glass panel. And you need like a set of specialized screws, and I believe there's a T8 torque screw. And what also can come in handy, besides having this small set with the T8, is maybe something like this. Because as you may know, Apple has sometimes a little bit of a special standard going on. And but the most important, I think, is this T8, so that you can remove the alloy frame. But I'm going to show this to you in a second, and at every step I'm going to show you which type of screwdriver you're going to need to disassemble and reassemble everything. So let's get started. So guys, I hope everything shows properly. What I'm quickly going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you so that you can see it really from close up. And then basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this glass panel removal tool, and you just put this on here, and then it just would gently lift the glass panel out, and that's basically it. And as you can see here, I have lifted the glass panel out, and it's really easy and straightforward. And as you can see here, it's held in place with these pins, and also it has a little bit of a magnetic mechanism going on. So be gentle and push it out straight, and you should be ready to go. Now, guys, maybe you have seen my previous video. I did a hard disk drive replacement in another video, so I'm not doing this the first time, so I'm going to go into it a little bit quicker. Basically, there are 12 screws, I believe, and you take this T8 torque screw, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it's the T8. And you just remove these screws. And be careful because they're different lengths. On the top, they're a little bit shorter. And then at the bottom, I marked here too, those are very long. So if you remove them, put them in order so that you know which place has which screws. And I'm gonna show this to you in a second. After I remove this, I just take carefully off the aluminum panel, and then we can remove the display and get to the CPU real quick. So let's get started. So basically I removed all the screws. That's really easy. Don't miss out on this access port here from the memory slots. Here's where the memory is installed. You have to take this out as well, otherwise the case won't come off properly. And again, a friendly reminder, manage this wisely. So this is from the top, this is from the side, and you see here there are two long ones at the bottom, and these top ones are also smaller than those. So don't mess this up, because if you just put it somewhere, it will create like a little bit of a chaos. So if you put it down orderly, the screws, then you will have you will have an easy time putting everything back together. So essentially what I'm going to do now, since everything is prepped, I can really lift this up very easily, very gently. And up here is like a small connector. You can easily take this off, and off comes the panel. Really easy. And yeah guys, if you watched my other video, maybe you know already, I cleaned everything previously. That usually if you use this for many years, it can really collect a lot of dust, which clogs up the airflow. So you can imagine the compounding issues that you can have. Like you have the thinness of the iMac itself, you can have the fans clog up, and theoretically, I assume after a long enough time, you can have the performance of the thermal paste degrade. So then you have the thinness, the clogging, and the degradation of the thermal paste. I always compensate it with like the fan tool, which maybe I'm going to show this to you at the end of the video, where I could control the fan speed. So I would just have the fans run faster. That compensated for it, so the iMac is well taken care of. But next what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove these screws here and then just pull the panel off, and then we can get started with putting in the CPU. So guys, what I'm now going to use is like this T6 screwdriver, and we have to take the display panel out. We have to disconnect 3 wires, and maybe I can move this a little bit here for you and then point out to you where exactly these wires are that you have to remove. I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit more, but that's probably about all I can zoom in right now for you. So basically what you want to do is you just lift the panel up just slightly and then inspect where you have to remove something. There is one connector here, there's like a flat cable, and there you need the screwdriver, the T6, to remove like a connector. Then you have something here, I think that might be the temperature sensor, and I'm just going to quickly pull this out. That was very easy. And then there's another cable, I assume it's the power cable that is below the panel that I'm going to show to you in a second. So keep in mind you have to remove 3 connectors. And yeah, maybe I can show this to you from another angle. I mean, after you remove these 2 the sensor and this graphics cable, you can really nicely flip this up and then just pull out the power connector below here. I hope this shows you how easy it really is if you know what you're doing. Okay guys, I just realized maybe I was zoomed in a little bit too much, but the point is like there's like below this foil there is a display connector, and I disconnected that, and now I can basically take the panel out and put it to the side and start working on the CPU. So it's relatively easy. It's no rocket science, but you have to be gentle, and I hope this really helps you to get like an overview. Like I said, I repeat this one more time. Disconnect the temperature sensor, disconnect this graphics connector, and then the power connector, and you can set the panel aside. Guys, I really hope this helps. And yeah, maybe again, since it's disassembled, maybe I can point out the different parts for you guys, and you see how compact everything is. This is where I usually used to replace the hard disk drive with a solid state drive. I did this like I told you in the previous video. And you see this is the location of the CPU, and this is the connection of the location of the graphics card. So basically how it works, the temperature is routed from these two locations, CPU and graphics card, to these two cooling elements, and then the fan blows air, sucks air from the bottom, blows it through here, through these cooling elements, through the power supply, and then pushes it out to like a tiny location at the top. And actually, you might think, wow, this is not the really smartest design. I mean, I get it. They wanted to try and make it compact. So obviously there's like this engineering trade-off going on. I mean, it has like an optical fan and a hard disk drive fan here as well, which I'm going to show to you in a second. So it has 3 fans in total, so it can move quite a bit of air through it. But one thing I really noticed, what really made me not want to buy a new iMac, is that the new iMacs, they got even thinner, and I believe they only have one big fan right now in the center, which I think there is a point when you can make an iMac just too thin. And I don't care how cool it looks, at the end of the day there's a trade-off. What does it matter if the iMac is super thin when it only has one fan and difficulty to push through all the air? It will just reduce the lifespan, because in my opinion, because it makes more wear and tear on the hardware. So in that sense, the old iMacs, I like them even more, because instead of one fan, they have 3 fans and they are thicker. So don't discount the old iMacs. If you're thinking about buying a new one, think about these things. I mean, this is easily overlooked. People just go to the store and it's like, oh my God, the iMac looks so awesome, I want one. But they don't understand all these technical parts. So that's why this is really interesting to see here right now. That's the side benefit of watching my video. So next up, I'm gonna take this apart, and basically there are some more screws I have to remove, and they all seem to have the same size. And I just checked this real quick. Here again, you will need the T8 size. So guys, you already noticed, you need to have the proper tools. Otherwise, a repair like that is going to come to a grinding halt, because you don't have the right, how do you say, screwdriver or something like this. So let me quickly disassemble this, and this should be pretty straightforward. Just take out the screws, and then you can lift these panels up, and obviously make sure to disconnect these other connectors here, and let's just get rolling. And guys, just so that we are on the same side, changing the CPU is a much more advanced task than just switching the hard disk drive, because here, in order to get to the CPU, you have to really remove the entire main board. And maybe you can see this here, there are tons of connectors everywhere. So make sure you take a picture from every part with your smartphone or camera before, so that if you don't remember, okay, where did which wire go, that you can refer to the picture and you can reassemble everything correctly. You see here, there are cables everywhere, temperature sensors, cables that go to the sound card. This seems to be the sound card, and the controllers for the fan. Here again, sensor cables that plug in here. So make sure you take a picture, so then you're gonna have an easy time reassembling everything. Otherwise, if you don't do that, it might take a lot of time or be a little bit tricky for you. So guys, I finally managed to find all the screws to loosen this board. I can take the board out right now, but just to give you an idea what it takes, I had to have 2 different screwdrivers, and there are some screws over there, and you have to manage these screws, because as you can see, they all have different heights. So the way I always approach this, I lay this exactly out the way it is on the main board, so that I have like the memory is down here, and so on and so forth, so that you know which points to reattach this. Otherwise you will have a big giant mess on your hand. And yeah, maybe you can see that replacing the CPU is really more of an advanced task. So again, the video is only for educational purposes. So now I'm going to take out the main board and then quickly swap the CPU. And also, if I find any more dust, I'm going to blow out the remaining dust maybe in here, and make sure everything is really nicely clean and well maintained while I'm at it. Because let me tell you, once I have replaced that CPU and everything, I'm not going to take this apart probably anymore, because I mean, the iMac is 10 years old. I mean, it works still extremely well, but it's old. So I'm just doing this maintenance to get out another year or two before I'm moving on to a different machine. So guys, finally the board is out. Here is CV3 fans, and boy, that was like a lot of work. It took like forever, and maybe you can see here there are small pockets where there's still dust accumulating, even though not long ago I put in a new SSD drive and I vacuumed most of it out. But even if you replace the SSD drive, there's still a lot of tight corners where dust and dirt collects. So you can only imagine that it gets exponentially worse the thinner the iMac gets. And I'm gonna clean out all those fans, I'm gonna clean the power supply, and then I'm gonna clean out this as well and replace the CPU. So I'm gonna be back in just a minute. So guys, as you can see, for the most part, I cleaned everything out. I just used carefully the vacuum and vacuumed away most of the dust. And now I'm just gonna use the sprayer here to maybe give it like a last touch up to remove like the last little pieces. And yeah, then the cleaning should be finished. So let's do this real quick. And guys, one thing I can guarantee you, if you ever have an iMac, I mean, you can see, despite I tried to clean this previously, there's still a lot of dust inside these inside this cooling element. So if you ever buy an iMac, it will probably clog up unless you're like in a controlled environment and working at a laboratory or something where the air is filtered. It's really good that I took this apart because I'm going to clean this out as well. So guys, finally we are at part 4 right now. So what we've done so far, I've given you the introduction, that was part 1. Then we did the disassembly, this was part 2, and then we did the cleaning, part 3, and now we're at part 4. And probably you have noticed there's a navigation on the bottom there that you can follow. Now we're going to do the install of the CPU itself. Obviously, for that we have to clean the CPU, and for this I'm just going to use the Arctic Clean Thermal Remover and then the Surface Purifier before I apply the Arctic MX4 new thermal compound. Yeah, it's called compound. Guys, English is not my first language, so I have to juggle German, English, and even a little bit Japanese. Obviously, maybe a microfiber towel is also pretty useful to wipe the surface clean. And since in my case the iMac is really that old, I'm gonna inspect very closely the condition of the thermal compound on the CPU. And I think what I'm gonna do is I'm also gonna remove the thermal compound on the graphics processor and replace this as well. But with the graphics processor, you also have to keep in mind there is not only the GPU, but also I think memory. So I also got these thermal pads, and I think this is the 1mm variant. Maybe I should have taken the smaller one. I will see that in a second because there is a small gap. The best thing is I just take all this apart and I show this to you. But my plan is to, like I told you, to replace the compound on both of these, the CPU and the GPU, and then use the thermal pad on the memory, because I think there are like some tiny gaps, and the compound is maybe not, or as far as I read, the compound is meant to be somewhere where it's like direct contact, and as soon as you have like a little bit of a gap going on, you want to use the thermal pads. So let me just quickly take this apart and show you what it looks like. So guys, as you can obviously see, it is an incredible amount of work to take this all apart, and I can only reiterate this more and more, like, manage all your screws, because otherwise this is like a puzzle. You're not going to be able to put this back together. Make sure you have the right tools, make sure you have enough time, make sure you have patience, and follow the instructions directly, otherwise you're going to mess something up. So guys, maybe what I can do is quickly show you the condition of the thermal paste after 10 years. I think it's really overdue for a replacement. I think the performance of this thermal paste degrades over time. And I also previously showed that this was really clogged up. I really cleaned this out very nicely. So in combination with the cleaning and the replacement of the thermal paste, we should also have a much better cooling performance, and that will help to maintain the iMac a little bit longer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap out this old CPU against the new one. I also used the thermal purifier once more to give the new CPU a little bit of a wipe down. And yeah, maybe the second thing I can show you is the graphics card. As you can see, that is the GPU itself, and here is the memory. What I'm going to do is I'm also going to clean this all up, because I'm pretty sure the thermal compound on the GPU is also a little bit degraded in performance. And here you see this is probably also not in the best shape. So I'm cleaning up again the compound, and then here is where the memory is, and where I'm going to put the thermal pads that I showed you previously. And yeah, maybe you have already noticed, that's all like mobile style graphics card. Honestly, I wish I could just switch the graphics card like I could to a brand new modern one, like I can. If you have seen maybe the videos of the Mac Pro, the Mac Pro has the ability you can just switch out the graphics card against a brand new one, like with 8 GB of memory, where you can play all the nicest games on and render your videos much quicker when you do videos like I do on YouTube. But unfortunately, with the old iMac, that's not possible. I think there was a bigger NVIDIA version, but honestly, the prices that I saw on eBay for the graphics cards, they were just like blown way out of proportion. It really seems that people buy these graphics cards and then just resell them for twice or triple the price. I have really no idea, but in my case, I'm just going to do a maintenance on the graphics processor and a little bit upgrade on the CPU, because CPU I could get fairly cheaply, but this I saw like is in excess of $100, sometimes $200, which if you think about it is ridiculous. If you buy a brand new graphics card for, let's say, a MacBook Pro, you can get a brand new state-of-the-art graphics card for $300. So why would I spend even $100 on like a really 10-year-old graphics card? That's kind of dumb. So that's my message to the resellers. If you're just buying these to resell them more expensive, I'm not going to buy it. No, thank you. I'm just going to use this and wait until my iMac falls apart. And I don't think it's going to fall apart because I'm taking good care of it and doing the maintenance. So let's jump to the CPU install and put all these pads on, and then put everything back together, because time flies and I want to make progress because it's getting dark outside. So let's get going. So guys, I cleaned everything. The new CPU is already installed. I cleaned the graphics card. I removed all the old compound. And what I found is that this Arctic Cleaner thermal remover, it works really well, but it has a very intense smell. So don't do this in like your small shack. Do this like in a good ventilated room, because I found that it's like a little bit I mean, it doesn't smell bad, but it's chemical, and I don't think it's particularly good idea to inhale those smells from this dissolving material. And in comparison, the purifier, so it's like a two-step process. First you remove the compound, and then you purify the surface for the application of the thermal pad and the new compound, the MX4, which is I think it's a high performance compound. So essentially what I did, and you see, like, this is like, I mean, I'm really thinking, oh my God, this takes so much time. A normal person will never even attempt this repair, because I mean, because for the average Joe, it's probably just too complicated. You see, everything is really nice and clean. Graphics card is cleaned, and when I removed the compound and everything, I noticed it started to become dried out and brittle. So I think it's really good to do the maintenance on this right now. And next, I'm gonna use this scalpel to cut into the right size the thermal pad, and then put the thermal pads on the memory, and then apply the MX4. So let's do this. So guys, it was surprisingly easy. I used the scalpel to cut the thermal pads, and apparently, maybe I hope this shows. I think I picked the right size, 1mm. Maybe if I tilt this a little bit, you can see it's about the same height then it's the graphics processor. So that was my only worry, that I ordered the wrong height of the thermal pad. Ultimately, I'm gonna see just in a minute when I put everything back together. But yeah, that's something maybe you want to take note of, because I googled this for a long time online, and I could not find any reference of what height of thermal pad you're supposed to use. So 1mm looks pretty good, and yeah, obviously, like you can see here, I used very little of it, just like a small corner, and that was all it took to prepare the graphics card. Of course, if you have the NVIDIA version, I think it might have more. Maybe, and the NVIDIA is a little bit bigger and has 8. I'm not sure, but depending on your iMac model, you might have 8 instead of 4 memory slots. But I'm not exactly sure. Maybe the 27-inch versions, the newer models, are slightly different, but basically the principle is the same, and that's why I'm showing this to you here. And yeah, guys, I'm not even sure whether I should show this to you, how to apply the thermal compound. I think it's pretty straightforward. The companies that produces the thermal compound, Arctic, they recommended, I think, the dot method. So I'm just going to make one small dot. You don't want to use too little, but you also don't want to use too much. So just take a reasonable amount. Okay, guys, like a little bit of a fail. I spread it. I took a little bit too much and spread it. And I kind of did the same here over on the CPU. So without further ado, I'm just going to put back together these cooling units. I put them on top. That's going to take some time, and then I'm reassembling it the way I disassembled it, and we should be ready to go. And maybe I give you like a little bit of an overview shot right here, both of the coolers, and I'm going to plug the graphics card in here and so on. So I'm assembling everything, and then I'm going to be right back. So guys, as you can see, I'm halfway putting everything back together, and yeah, you see the cable mess is obviously everywhere. Loose cables everywhere, so I'm gonna have to connect all that into the right connectors. And also, like I told you in the beginning, I kept good track of all the different parts so that I can put it back the right way together, because that I already found that kind of really difficult to reassemble the different parts. You really have to be careful what the heck you're doing, because otherwise you switch out one wrong screw and it will not fit the right way. So really be organized so that you have an easy time putting it back together. I was organized. It still took me a while, but it is really manageable, so don't be intimidated by it. And I'm going to complete the rest, and then I'm going to be right back. And guys, maybe you can see this here. I also took some isopropyl alcohol and took the power supply out. Obviously, the power supply, you want to be extra careful. I took this out and I did some cleaning, so it really should be like look like brand new, because I noticed that when I took it apart, there was like a lot of, I don't know whether it comes from the solder or when they solder it and afterwards they send it to like, I don't think, how do you call this in the US, like liquid flux or something. I felt like stuff was like migrating, and it was always like there white spots and everything on this board. So I cleaned it with the isopropyl alcohol, and yeah, I hope everything is gonna work well, because I'm finally gonna put everything together and give it a test. But like, check this out, it looks like brand spanking new. It looks like fresh out of the factory, and I'm feeling this is really excellent maintenance and almost like detailing your car at the car show, only that it's the iMac. So let's see whether it works and what the performance looks like. And guys, success. It seems everything works fine. I hope you can see this here. Usually I'm always using this tool called Max Fan Control, and yeah, I mean the temperatures are really low. What I'm just gonna do is I'm gonna finish up for today and just put the aluminum frame back on. Initially I forgot to connect the temperature sensor from the display, so all the fans were running really fast. There was just this tiny cable that I missed, so make sure you plug in everything exactly the way you removed it, and then you should be fine. And I'm going to be back after using this for a couple of days, and then I'm going to show you the performance. It already detected the faster CPU, and I'm very happy with what I've done so far. So let's skip ahead a couple of days and then I'll be right back with the conclusion, part 5. So guys, this concludes the tutorial on how to change the CPU inside your iMac. I think the steps vary a little bit from model to model, but basically it's the same kind of principle. And basically what I did in part 1, I introduced you to the project. In part 2, I showed you how to disassemble it, gave you a lot of useful tips like what kind of tools you need for that. Then in part 3, we went over how to clean the iMac, and I shared with you my experience in how that system can clog up and that it might make sense to clean your iMac even if you don't plan to change the CPU. And then I went in depth onto the installation process, how you actually install the CPU, and I showed you the thermal compound that I used. I explained to you that thermal paste sometimes can degrade over time, and I shared with you the size of the thermal pads that I used for the graphics card, because the graphics card had like a little bit of a gap going on. So basically this concludes part 5, and I shown you that everything works like I expected, and I'm convinced that it will help you with your repair/maintenance project. So as a final note, just a quick reminder again, if you haven't already done so, head over to my channel page, hit that subscribe button, and in the top right corner, I think I mentioned this in the beginning, that I have this online training course that highlights some of the most amazing case studies that I collected over the last 2 years that show how people became successful online, building significant income first as a side income, and then scaling it up to kind of like epic proportions. And make sure to enroll in the free online training so that you don't miss out on these free case studies, because that's really insightful, and it's also something I always missed in business school. In business school, they always do the accounting and the marketing and the management and the risk management and all the financial stuff, but in my case, there was like too little on innovation and online business, so this is why I'm sharing this with you. I see you in the next video. Take care. And yeah guys, more and more people have already subscribed to my channel because of the useful content that I produce, like the tutorials or product reviews such as this Plantronics USB headset. And surprisingly, the most benefit people seem to get is from my online course with the case studies that show how people have become so super successful online, building a side income over time. And I'm going to share this with you. So I see you in the next video. Take care.